This is something that I've been itching to talk about. I think this is actually really interesting. There's a new ad campaign started by a bunch of lefties, and it's called Settle for Biden. So the idea is pretty self-explanatory. They have all these different ads, and there really are a lot of them. Some of them have Noam Chomsky, and it says, like, well, he's settling for Biden, why can't you? Another one has Angela Davis, and it says, something very similar. A lot of the ads actually acknowledge Biden's terrible record. A lot of the ads that I've seen have acknowledged his terrible record. So for me, whenever I talk about Joe Biden and the many ways in which he let the country down, he supported NAFTA, supported the Patriot Act, supported the Iraq War, wrote the crime bill. There are many specific things that you can point to where you say, this is just inexcusable. There's also weird stuff that Biden has done, which is just like, why? One of the things, he was big on trying to ban raves at some point in like the late 80s or 90s. Just a mess. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, so, you're never going to convince somebody like me to support Biden if you serve me a plate of Dookie and say it's a fudge brownie. Like, you have to be honest, and you have to be like, yeah, it's a plate of Dookie. Nina Turner made a great point the other day. She said, voting for Biden is like eating half a plate of shit. Now, people can be all outraged about that and get mad at Nina Turner, but she did say pretty clearly that, Trump would be the full plate of shit and Biden is a half a plate of shit. So it's an honest thing to say. Now, people can have different interpretations about what to do with the fact that it's a plate of shit and half a plate of shit. But I think the thing that triggers people on the left the most is when you don't acknowledge that that's the situation. You don't acknowledge that indeed we are in a situation where it's nothing but terrible options, and it's just a matter of how do we make the least terrible option. So there are plenty of people who just are overreaching and are bullshitting you in the process of making a case for Biden, where they act like he's an imperfect friend. That's the one that probably rubs me the wrong way the most. So I have to say, in some ways, I actually kind of respect this ad campaign. I do. In some ways, I respect it, because at least it's honest. And it is kind of an argument that has a higher likelihood of working on people who are truly on the left, because you're not lying. You're not lying. Now, I will say this as well, though, and this is where they should have been a little bit more strategic. There are some ads in the ad campaign that I really hate, and I hate them because they're wrong. So, there's one ad that got under my skin, which basically says that Biden is for racial justice and Trump isn't. Biden's not for racial justice. You can't make such a case. That's just not. Even to this day, he doesn't want to legalize marijuana and free the nonviolent drug offenders. So if he doesn't want to legalize marijuana, can you really say he's for racial justice when the drug war is racist and disproportionately used to crack down on people of color? I don't think you can make that case. If it is true that mass incarceration is the new Jim Crow, then you cannot say he can fuel that mass incarceration and be for racial justice. So there's one ad that's BS. But the one that was the worst, honestly, was shaming Green Party voters and basically saying that a vote for the Green Party is a vote for Trump and Republicans. That's just empirically not true. And it's the same kind of gross tactics that corporate Democrats use. And it's going to make people on the left hate you. It's just not true. You know what a vote for the Green Party is? A vote for the Green Party. Now you could say, oh my God, you're taking away a vote from Joe Biden if you do that. But you're just assuming that everybody who votes for the Green Party would otherwise vote for Joe Biden. That's not true. You'd have to poll them. You'd have to ask them. And just like we saw with Jill Stein in the 2016 election, when you polled Jill Stein voters and asked, who would you vote for if you couldn't vote for Jill Stein? If I'm not mistaken, most of them said, I would stay home. I would stay home. Then you had a small percentage of them said they would vote for Trump. And then you had, I believe the number was about 20% or maybe 22% that said they would have voted for Hillary. So if you're nuanced and you argue, hey, the 22% of Jill Stein voters would have gone for Hillary if Stein dropped out, that's an honest point. And I could say, okay, you're right, but that's not enough to tilt the election. So it's not this own that you think it is. Like, oh, if you vote for the Greens, you're just handing over power to the Republicans. No, you're not. That's just not true. But they're not even doing that. They're not being specific about it. They're not citing poll numbers, because my guess is you'd see a similar thing these days where if somebody votes for Howie Hawkins in the Green Party and then you poll them, hey, who would you vote for if it wasn't Howie? My guess is you'll see a similar breakdown. You'll see that most of them would have stayed home. So those are not Biden votes. A small percentage of them would have went for Trump, not Biden votes, and maybe 20% would have voted for Biden. It's so weird that you have this ad campaign that the idea of it, I actually respect, because it's like, okay, we're not going to lie to you, but we're going to tell you why we think you should still do this, why we think you should still vote for Biden. I respect that. That's fine. Make that case. I think there's something refreshing about somebody who is pro-Biden, but they're not lying to themselves or lying to other people about it. That's cool. But as soon as you cross the line into this kind of stuff where you're shaming Green Party voters, well, then like the whole point of the settle for Biden thing is gone, because you're making the same shitty arguments as corporate Democrats and neoliberals. And that ad is effectively completely untrue, and it's a smear. To say if you vote for the Green Party, you vote for Republicans. And so therefore, it's trying to twist their arm, which is the exact same thing that the corporate Democrats do. You're trying to force them, twist their arm, smear them, shame them into voting for Biden. That's never going to work. So while I actually like the idea, the settle for Biden thing, at first I thought it was a joke. It turns out it's real. They need to be more strategic and intelligent in how they make their pitch, because you're just going to turn people off to it the second that you try to smear them or shame them. If your role is, we're going to be the honest people, we're going to be the honest ones who are pro-Biden, then really fulfill that role. Be honest and pro-Biden. Admit every flaw, every downside, while still having smart, intelligent arguments as to why you think he's enough of a lesser evil where it truly is merited to vote for him. Because that is definitely a defensible position. But yeah, they went too far with the Green Party shaming. I am not on board with voter shaming. I'm not on board with smearing. That's why every time I talk on this show, and by the way, that cuts every direction, just so you know, because there are a lot of people who say, oh, I'm anti-voter shaming, and then they'll shame somebody who's voting for somebody else that they're not voting for. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. Even people on the left who say, I'm not pro-voter shaming, and then they'll voter shame a Biden voter. And it's like, well, you just said you're not pro-voter shaming. Does that only mean when people voter shame you? I'm actually principled in that. I don't think it makes sense to voter shame. I think you should craft arguments and make your point clear and base it on the evidence and on the records. And I feel like it's always a cheap, lazy, easy way out to just kind of throw your hands up and start throwing accusations at people and getting mad that they don't already agree with you. And even though I like the ad campaign, they really needed to get rid of that Green Party ad. They really need to not ever BS, and it is BS to say Biden's for racial justice. Do the settle for Biden thing and keep it in the vein of what it should be, which is completely honest and open about all of his downsides and all of his flaws. But you can have, like, there are very specific areas where there is zero equivalence between the two, and that's what you should lean into if you're doing a settle for Biden thing. If you really want to lean into the things where he's better, I mean, first and foremost would have to be the Paris Climate Agreement. Biden would put us right back in the Paris Climate Agreement. He put us right back in there. And that's huge for the issue of climate change. There are very specific things you could point to where you're like, Biden will be better on this. So now we are going to lean into this thing specifically. There's no question that Biden would be better on the issue of Iran. Him and Obama did the Iran deal. Okay? That was probably the best thing Obama did, was the Iran deal. So if Biden tries to de-escalate with Iran, that's a wonderful thing. Lean into that. There's an area where he's clearly better. Clearly better. You honestly could lean into the fact that his picks will be centrist for the courts. Now, I hate centrism, and so does most of my audience, but it's better than the freaking far-right justices that Trump's appointing everywhere. There's no, debate on that. That's clear. You'd rather have a Merrick Garland than a Neil Gorsuch. It's true. Rather have Merrick Garland than Brett Kavanaugh, even though Merrick Garland would let us down in many ways. So there are areas where Biden is better. You have to make the case based on that and that alone, and just total honesty and openness. So, but I don't know why I'm giving them advice, but I don't even know why I'm giving them advice. I do know. I'm lying. I do know why I'm giving them advice. It was the closest thing to an honest pitch I've ever seen for Biden that it interested me. It interested me that it was like the kind of approach that actually does have a prayer of getting through to some on the left. There's some who you're never going to get. And that's just the nature of the way it works. It is what it is. But, there are some who you will if you make good enough arguments. So let's see if they do it. Let's see if they actually adjust moving forward, or if they kind of double down on, the voter shaming and the few lies that they told about Biden. There are many ads that are actually, I just think, flat out good. But, there were some that were questionable, and those are the ones I explained.